Hello, everybody. Welcome to this lesson. Now, we're continuing on from the previous lesson. We talked about the NIST post cryptographic standards, right? And we talked about the three. Two of them are lattice based, and one is hash based, and one is intended to be like as a backup. So, let's talk about a company, right? So, we have like a what do you call a company in the healthcare sector, and their focus is on sensitive patient information, right? Medical records, billing information, personal data. You can imagine how sensitive that sort of data is. And this company is very, very serious about protecting its data. And they are concerned about the threat posed by quantum computing. Now, with the release of NIST's post quantum cryptography standards, they have decided to implement these new standards. And they want to make sure that their data remains secure, even if you move towards a post quantum computing environment. Now, how do they go about it? Well, first of all, they would think about what sort of information requires long-term protection. They don't just blindly go ahead and start implementing it, right? So they're going to look at what they have and what are uh, the key aspects, like what requires protecting. They're going to look at that, right? So the first one would be patient medical records. Now, the sensitivity of that is very high, right? And the duration for protection is 20 plus years. So 20 plus years, we're going to have quantum computing by that time, right? It is currently protected by AES for data arrest and RSA for key exchange. So is the post quantum cryptography needed? Yes, absolutely. They're going to replace it with FIPS 203 for key exchange and AES, and they're going to wrap it around the PQC wrapped keys. So they're going to protect their encryption keys with post quantum cryptography, right? Um, why? Because the data sensitivity of data is very, very high, and they need to by that time quantum computing will become available, so they cannot rely on the existing protection. The second one is billing and insurance data. The sensitivity of that is again high, 7 to 10 years, right? They are using RSA for key exchange and ECC for RSA for digital signatures and ECC for key exchange. Is PQC needed? Absolutely. Both of these algorithms are very, very vulnerable to quantum computing. They're going to replace it FIPS 204 for digital signatures and FIPS 203 for key exchange. Okay, what else? Clinical trial data. So the sensitivity of that is high. Again, 15 plus years. You need to have that secured. Again, they're using ECC for key exchange and SHA for hashing. Does that require to be replaced? Absolutely. Again, you're going to need something. They think about using FIPS 205 for digital signatures and FIPS 203. And of course, all of this is hypothetical, guys. I'm not saying that this is exactly what you have to copy, but this is just to show you an example. Lastly, do they have? They have operational data like logistics and scheduling. The sensitivity of that is low, 3 to 5 years. They're using AES for encryption and RSA for key exchange. Do you need PQC? No, the effort is not needed here. Current cryptography is enough. The timeline is also quite low, and they can consider using PQC, but it's not a hard and fast requirement. They can look at doubling the key length of the AES encryption keys. Remember what we talked about earlier? That symmetric encryption is not as vulnerable. So this is I made this table. I'm not saying this is exactly what you have to think about, but just to show you how a company would go about implementing the NIST standards. You don't have to blindly just implement it everywhere, right? First of all, you won't be able to do it, right? And this is what this company understands. So that's why they're going about it in a such a way. So now they have this table. Now they're going to prioritize implementing PQC for patient medical records, billing and insurance data, and clinical trial data, right? Why? Because this is the data that is the most sensitive and requires long-term protection, and it makes it the most top candidate, right? They're not going to just uh, blindly implement it everywhere, right? Because first of all, they don't have the time, they don't have the money, they have limited resources, limited people. They want to focus on the things which are the most important. Okay, so now that they have it, so now they're going to transition to PQC standards. We talked about this. They're going to adopt FIPS 203 for key exchange, ensuring that the keys used to encrypt sensitive data are protected from quantum attacks. And for the actual data encryption, they can continue using AES, but they're going to protect that key with PQC. Why? Because symmetric encryption is, like I said, is not as vulnerable. And for digital signatures, they're going to transition to using FIPS 204 and 205. And this will make sure that their digital signatures remain secure. Why? Because the current algorithms like RSA and ECC, they are still vulnerable, right? So keep this in mind. Always remember that quantum computers are not as effective at breaking symmetric encryption as they are with asymmetric encryption. And they can reduce the key size, but you can effectively counter that by increasing the key size, right? So remember this in mind. Keep this in mind when you're thinking about adopting it for within your environment. And so, what else do they have to do? Vendor coordination. Now they're gonna coordinate with the IT vendors, because most companies, they do not live in an isolated ecosystem, right? They have reliance on vendors. They're gonna make sure that all systems, including third-party software, they are aligned. You can't just go ahead and implement PQC without coordinating with your partners, right? And they're gonna update contracts. They're gonna make sure that the new vendors, they're reflecting the new security requirements, and they're going to be also following this quantum resistant algorithms. They get their legal teams involved to make sure that the company is covered if something happens. And so the company is also covered, and the company is also aware about their partners are also aware if they are that they have to follow certain post quantum cryptography standards which are compliant with NIST. And this is going to become more and more common over the years. Employee training. You can't just implement this in a vacuum, right? Because you need the help of IT, you need like executive support also. And we're going to talk about this more in the coming chapters. But so the IT and cybersecurity teams are going to receive training like courses like this, right? What PQC is, how to implement it. The company is also going to educate employees on the importance of these new measures to ensure like a compliance, so that resistance is not there when you start implementing it, because this is going to be a massive multi-year project. It's not going to be a small thing that happens in 1 month, right? And lastly, they can implement like a continuous monitoring program to track progress, because management wants to know how is it going? Is it 10% complete, 20% complete? How many systems have we covered? What is still vulnerable? What is our risk exposure? And they're also going to put a monitoring program to make sure that any new standards that NIST released, they are up to date with it, right? They want to make sure that they are completely up to date with the further advancements on post quantum cryptography. So they're going to have these reviews, they're going to have a governance process. So what are the action points that we get from learning about PQC and from like the NIST? First of all, please read the NIST standards. First of all, you make yourself literate about these new standards which have come out. Make an inventory of your data. How long does it have to be secure, and what cryptography you used? Okay, don't just blindly say I'm going to implement it everywhere. It won't work. Your project will fail. What information is required to be protected? How long? Estimate the time it will take to switch to PQC. And first of all, check whether your equipment even supports PQC, right? And take into account the transition to PQC as part of your life cycle management when purchasing new equipment. If you're buying new hardware, new appliances, does that have the capability to support it or not? So, by looking at all of these things, you will put your company in a good place to support post quantum cryptography when it comes out. So this was like a lot of information to take in. I would recommend taking this lesson a few times so you fully understand what NIST is and how these standards will get implemented. So now that we have a good understanding, we're going to talk about another topic, which is quantum key distribution, an important topic which sometimes get confused between the two. So we're going to talk about this in the next lesson. Thank you very much, and I'll see you there.